Imagine two people, same city, same age, same starting salary. 5 years later, one of them owns 3 income streams, investments, and wakes up excited about Monday. The other is still complaining about the economy, still broke, still waiting for something outside themselves to change. Same world, completely different realities. And the only thing that was ever different between them wasn't luck, wasn't connections, wasn't even talent. It was the 6 inches between their ears. Today, we are going to go deep into the psychology of the rich versus the poor mindset. And I promise you, by the end of this video, you will never see money, failure, or opportunity the same way again. Let's start with the most uncomfortable truth in personal finance psychology. Being broke is often a circumstance, but staying broke is almost always a mindset. Now, before you misread that, this is not about blaming poor people or glorifying rich people. This is about understanding the invisible psychological architecture that quietly governs every financial decision a human being makes. Because here's what most people don't realize. Your brain has a relationship with money, and that relationship was mostly formed before you were 10 years old. Psychologists call this your money script. It's the collection of beliefs, emotions, and unconscious narratives you inherited from watching your parents, your community, and your environment interact with wealth. If you grew up hearing money doesn't grow on trees, rich people are greedy, or we just aren't the kind of people who get wealthy, those sentences didn't just disappear. They became operating code. They became the lens through which your adult brain evaluates every opportunity, every risk, and every financial decision you will ever make. And here's what makes this terrifying. Most people are running financial lives based on programming they never chose, never examined, and never questioned. Now, let's get into the core psychological differences, and let's start with the one that changes everything, the locus of control. Psychologist Julian Rotter introduced this concept in 1954, and it may be the single most powerful predictor of financial behavior ever identified. People with an internal locus of control believe that their actions, decisions, and mindset are the primary drivers of their outcomes. People with an external locus of control believe that life happens to them, that the economy, the government, their boss, their upbringing, bad luck, or the system is responsible for where they are. Now, which group do you think is overrepresented among the wealthy? Study after study confirms it. High net worth individuals overwhelmingly report internal locus of control. They believe they are the cause, not the effect. And this single belief changes everything downstream. When you believe you are in control, you take initiative. When you take initiative, you create opportunities. When you create opportunities, you develop skills. When you develop skills, you generate income. The loop builds on itself. But when you believe the world is happening to you, you wait. You wait for the raise that should have come. You wait for the economy to improve. You wait for someone to notice you. And while you wait, time, which is the only asset that can never be recovered, disappears. Let's go deeper into how this plays out in real behavior, because this isn't abstract philosophy. This is neurological reality. Neuroscience research shows that people who operate from a scarcity mindset, the psychological state of feeling like there is never enough, actually experience measurable cognitive impairment. A landmark Harvard study by Sendil Mullainathan and Eldar Shafir found that the mental burden of financial scarcity consumed the equivalent of 13 IQ points in cognitive bandwidth. Think about that. The stress of not having enough money doesn't just feel bad. It literally reduces your capacity to think clearly, plan ahead, and make good decisions. It's a cruel psychological trap. You are poor, so you are stressed. You are stressed, so your thinking is impaired. Your thinking is impaired, so you make worse financial decisions. And worse financial decisions keep you poor. The poor mindset isn't a character flaw. It's often a cognitive consequence of living under constant financial pressure. But here's where it gets truly fascinating, and where the rich mindset diverges sharply. People who have internalized an abundance mindset don't just feel better emotionally. Their brains are literally operating with more available cognitive bandwidth. They can think in longer time horizons. They can delay gratification more easily. They can assess risk more rationally. They can spot opportunities that the scarcity brain, clouded by anxiety and short-term survival thinking, completely misses. And this is why the rich often seem to get luckier. It's not luck, it's bandwidth. They have the mental space to notice what's available, while the scarcity mind is too busy managing the fire of today to plan for tomorrow. Now, let's talk about failure, because this is where the rich and poor mindset diverge most visibly, most dramatically, and most importantly. The poor mindset is terrified of failure. Not because poor people are cowards, but because psychologically, failure has a completely different weight when you have no safety net. When every mistake is potentially catastrophic, the brain learns to avoid risk at all costs. And avoiding risk sounds rational until you realize that in a capitalist economy, every meaningful financial opportunity requires some form of calculated risk. Starting a business, risk. Investing, risk. Negotiating for more money, social risk. Switching careers, risk. The person who is psychologically paralyzed by the fear of failure will avoid all of these, stay in the safe zone, and wonder why nothing changes. But the rich mindset, and I'm talking here about the psychological pattern, not just the bank balance, treats failure as data, not as identity, not as proof of worthlessness, not as the universe confirming your worst fears about yourself. Just data. What worked, what didn't, what to adjust, what to try next. This reframing isn't just a motivational poster. It's a deeply studied psychological pattern. Carol Dweck's legendary research on growth versus fixed mindset maps almost perfectly onto the rich versus poor mindset divide. The fixed mindset person believes their abilities, intelligence, and potential are static. You either have it or you don't. The growth mindset person believes every skill, every ability, and every outcome can be developed through effort and learning. And the financial implications of this are enormous. The fixed mindset person avoids challenges that might expose their limitations. The growth mindset person seeks challenges because each one is a chance to expand. One is playing not to lose. The other is playing to win. These are not the same game, even when the board looks identical. Now let's talk about time. Because the rich and poor mindset experience time completely differently. And this difference alone explains decades of diverging financial outcomes. Psychological research consistently shows that wealthy individuals think in longer time horizons. They make decisions today based on where they want to be in 10, 20, or 30 years. They plant trees whose shade they might never sit under. Conversely, the scarcity mindset compresses time perception. When survival is the primary concern, The brain narrows its focus to the immediate. What do I need right now? How do I get through this week? What's the fastest solution to this present problem? This is called hyperbolic discounting. The psychological tendency to overvalue immediate rewards at the expense of larger future rewards. It's why the poor mindset spends the bonus instead of investing it, buys the depreciating car instead of the appreciating asset, and chooses the comfortable certainty of a paycheck over the uncertain but exponential upside of ownership. And once again, this isn't a moral failing. It is a psychological adaptation to an environment where the future feels untrustworthy and the present feels urgent. But it is also a pattern that can be consciously interrupted once you see it clearly. Let's now look at the psychology of self-worth and income, because these two things are more intertwined than most people are willing to admit. There is a psychological concept called your financial thermostat, first articulated by T. Harv Eker, which suggests that every person has an unconscious income set point, a level of wealth that feels familiar, safe, and deserved. And here's what's insidious about it. Your brain will unconsciously self-sabotage to return to that set point, exactly like a thermostat brings a room back to its default temperature. This is why lottery winners statistically return to their prior financial state within a few years. This is why people get promotions and immediately inflate their lifestyle to consume the entire raise. This is why some entrepreneurs hit a certain revenue level and unconsciously stop pushing. Because at some deep psychological level, more than that amount feels dangerous, undeserved, or somehow wrong. The rich mindset has a high financial thermostat. Not because rich people are better humans, but because somewhere along the way, their psychological identity aligned with abundance. They feel they deserve wealth. They feel comfortable holding it. They feel capable of growing it. The poor mindset often carries deep, invisible guilt or fear around money, as if having too much makes you a bad person, or as if success will change you, or as if you will somehow be punished for wanting more. And that psychological weight quietly governs every financial decision below the surface. This brings us to the psychology of association and environment, which is where mindset stops being purely internal and becomes deeply social. Jim Rohn's famous observation that you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with is not just a motivational cliche. It is rooted in real psychological mechanisms. Mirror neurons in the human brain literally cause us to unconsciously absorb the behavioral patterns, emotional states, and belief systems of the people closest to us. This means that if your 5 closest relationships all operate from scarcity thinking, risk aversion, financial pessimism, and victim narratives, you are absorbing those patterns at a neurological level, whether you want to or not. And if your environment is filled with people who think abundantly, who take calculated risks, who speak about money with confidence and curiosity rather than shame and fear, that too gets absorbed. The rich don't just invest money, they invest in environments. They deliberately, sometimes ruthlessly, curate who gets access to their time and mental space. And in doing so, they protect and reinforce the psychological patterns that keep generating wealth. Now let's talk about something that cuts right to the core of this whole topic. And that's the psychology of ownership versus employment as a mindset, not just a job description. The poor mindset, at its deepest level, is an employee mindset. Not because there's anything wrong with employment, but because the psychological orientation is, I will trade my time for money, and someone else will decide what that time is worth. The rich mindset is an owner mindset. The psychological orientation is I will build systems, assets, and value that generate returns beyond my direct time input. This is not about job titles. A CEO can have an employee mindset. A street vendor can have an owner mindset. It's about whether you see yourself as a resource being consumed by the economy or as a builder creating something that compounds. And this psychological shift from trading time to building systems is arguably the single most important mental transition between the two worlds. Let me now bring everything together with the most important psychological truth of this entire video, and it's one that most self-help content completely misses. Changing your mindset is not a decision, it's a process. You cannot simply choose to think abundantly after 30 years of scarcity programming any more than you can choose to be fluent in a language you've never studied. Mindset change requires deliberate, consistent, neurological rewiring. It requires identifying your specific money scripts and examining where they came from. It requires intentional exposure to new models of thinking through books, mentors, environments, and experiences that challenge your existing programming. It requires small, repeated acts of financial courage, taking the tiny risk, having the difficult salary negotiation, making the first small investment. Because each of these actions sends a signal to your brain that you are someone who does these things, and identity follows behavior far more reliably than behavior follows identity. And it requires patience, because the brain, as neuroplasticity research confirms, does change, but it changes gradually through consistent repetition, not overnight epiphanies. So, where does this leave you? If you recognized yourself in the scarcity patterns, the fear of failure, the compressed time horizon, the low financial thermostat, that recognition is not a verdict. It is a starting point. The fact that you can see the pattern means you are already partially outside it. And being outside the pattern, even slightly, is where all change begins. The gap between the rich mindset and the poor mindset is not talent, not luck, not family background, and not intelligence. It is a set of learned psychological patterns. And what was learned can be unlearned. What was programmed can be reprogrammed. The only question that actually matters is whether you are willing to do the slow, uncomfortable, deeply personal work of examining your own mind. Because that work, more than any investment, any strategy, or any opportunity, is the real source of every lasting financial transformation that has ever happened in the history of human wealth.